how do you actually know if you're being efficient or not?
By reports.
Can you generate reporting on GHL? No, you can't.
Today's guest, some would say he's an architect, some would say he's a wizard, but he's going to help you get more sales and give you a completely different outlook with sales team management and sales leadership. We switched to HubSpot about a year ago and now you're helping us optimize it. We invested in better software, but never invested in actually using the software properly.
We're rolling a competition over the next 30 days. So now when you go in and you do your training, then you need the training agenda. You've all been racing in a Mercedes. You're now going to go into a Ferrari.
The way you're viewing things is so different to how many sales managers would view them.
Just start simple. What are the steps? As you get better, you can go up and down. Right?
What metrics go into your baseline? So when you measure for the last 3 months, what are these specifically? Welcome to the Lead to Win podcast. Today's guest, some would say he's an architect, some would say he's a wizard, but he's going to help you get more sales and give you a completely different outlook that you've seen with sales team management and sales leadership. So I'm really excited to speak to our guest today, Platt. Do you know when you're a really good sales manager at a company, you actually don't know about systems. You think you do because it was given to you. When I worked at a company that was making 48 million revenue, I was the best sales manager. I was like constantly getting all these awards and constantly making all this commission, but the system was given to me, which means when I have my own business now, I've never had to build it. So you now have to learn how to build all this stuff.
Well, there's different engines, right? So you have your marketing engine, you have your sales engine, then you have fulfillment, right? Then you have your financials, and you have your legal, and you have everything else that falls in between that. Every single one of these engines is broken down into people, process, platform, right? When you're a great sales director, or you're great at managing a sales team, you're really good at controlling and maintaining one specific engine. When you start your business, there's potentially 6, 7, 8, 9 things that you have to, one, build a role for, properly set those responsibilities, expectations, all of these different components, and you have to have a proven process, right? And then you need to figure out a way to put systems around it. And when you're just really good at sales, what typically happens with a lot of these companies or a lot of startups is they get really good at sales and they build their entire business around what their skill set is, which is sales. And then the other areas, people assume responsibility of them, so they never actually get put together properly, right? So it's one assumed responsibility to the next, to the next, to the next. Some people get really fortunate because they hire the right people early, but that's not the...
And some people are really good, Homozy, who's just good at marketing and sales, and then hires a great, or marries a great operator.
100%. Yes. And that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do. Actually, when we were talking, right, I was like, look, like integrator, like it's a myth. Yeah. At least that's my take on it, right? The reason I say that is because a lot of people, actually I was talking to, are you familiar with Kate on Cole's team? She's like one of their head recruiters.
I've met her before, I met her in London.
So she was, I was chatting with her yesterday and she was like, I had somebody come to me and they're like, I need a COO. They need to be able to run my ads, build my marketing systems, build my funnels, manage my sales team. I also want them to take some sales calls, build the sales system, do my reporting,
build me a business.
Laid out like this 40 different thing. And I was like, okay, so technically you're looking for what people would call an integrator. That person does not exist. That person is running a company right now. You know what I mean?
Exactly that.
So, and then also when you bring people on with too much responsibility, I mean, I've gone through many different growing pains similar to what we were talking about, where it's like, I was a really, really good at building a sales department, right? That's how I got my start, right? So I've gone through many different iterations of sales momentum and different companies I've started. And when you have people that are floaters, meaning they could be responsible for this, they could be responsible for this, they can run over here and do a little bit of that, run over here, do a little bit of that. At a certain point in scale, that actually hurts you a lot because there's no key owner to anything, right? So if something doesn't get done or a goal doesn't get met, who's responsible?
Yeah, and most people don't even know what needs to be measured, or forget, you're talking about how to measure it, but then you need to know what needs to be measured and have that number in place to even know, and that's where a lot of people need guidance on. It's not just the tracking sheet, it's like knowing what needs to even go into the tracking sheet.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people track stuff that doesn't matter at the end of the day too, right? So, and that that's why when we were talking over the last couple of weeks, like we run something called baseline, right? Which there's a baseline for every engine or every component of your company, right? Which is the averages from a trailing period, right? So 90 days trailing metrics of client success, right? Which could be how many people get onboarded, what's the time from payment to actually getting started in your program or your service, right? Then you have, time to first result, right? Or deliverables, right? Then you have success rate, then you have referral collection, then you have testimony. So you have all these numbers that go across, and if you take, 100 clients over 90 days, right? What's your averages, right? That's how you set proper expectations with somebody who's coming into that role, right? A lot of the times people just create arbitrary metrics because it's what they're told to track as KPIs, but then the process and the system do nothing to actually support the metrics that they're trying to track. So they're just tracking a bunch of arbitrary things, right?
I hear you. I want to get really deep into sales and like Richie extracting all the knowledge from your brain. But first, I do have a bit of a bone to pick with you, which is your company does a build out for HubSpot, and it helps a lot of businesses. And I've seen a lot of the testimonials that you do, and the companies that you've worked with, everyone from PBD to a lot of these bigger businesses, and even the mastermind I went to in Tampa, like many people rave about what you do. And I feel like, is HubSpot overkill for a lot of businesses? Because if I can just get someone to white label me Go High Level for $200, why would I then need to pay 10 times more than that for HubSpot? Like, it's almost as if you're overcooking these businesses, not just on systems, processes, data, but also the spend as well. So why would someone want HubSpot instead of Go High Level?
So, one, I've got a question for you, actually.
Okay.
Would you prefer to be more agile, meaning less technology, but more use, right? Higher leverage, and by more agility, I mean being able to act and aggressively target specific metrics, goals, whatever the case may be, quickly, right? That was what I would call agility, right? Being able to make pivots that don't disrupt your business. Or would you rather be in a more fragmented system where you're going to be bolting on lots of different platforms?
And in this scenario, is GHL a fragmented system?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if I don't know, like it's a very Yorkshire way of saying things, which is I'm from Sheffield and in the UK.
Wait, what was that?
I'm from Sheffield in the UK. So this is like a very much a saying that people would say where I'm from. If I don't know dick about dick,
okay,
what does it matter what system I have? Why not just get the simplest thing, which is the easiest to plug in? So comparing the two, would do on a fragmented system or something that's more agile, which is your question, I just need the most simplest, quickest thing just to get started.
Correct. And based on what you're saying, when you're just getting started, right, it doesn't necessarily matter what platform you're on, right? Because you need a proof concept,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't make sense to invest a bunch of money into anything unless you know it's going to work and you're going to be able to move things forward and et cetera, right? So the way I look at, take GHL, HubSpot, take it all, just put that aside for a second. When we're looking at a business and when they're coming on and they're starting their program, and they're figuring out marketing and they're figuring out sales and they're figuring out their offer and how they're actually going to position themselves and all these different things, new team members, use the cheapest thing that you know how to use at the end of the day, right? Sub 50 grand, sub 100K. Like the system is not going to be as impactful early on, right? You need something that's easy, something that you could set up quickly, something that's cheap, right? Something that can give you a really quick time to value, right? And I think for GHL, it makes a ton of sense. I think it's perfect for that, right? I think if you're just getting going, new business owner, new offer, you want to get it proven, right? You want to get the team moving, you want to get some revenue in, profit, right? I would say go with whatever you're comfortable with, whether that's
so
close,
when's the time
whether
to
that's
upgrade?
GHL, whether that's, doesn't matter, whether that's Google Sheets.
When is the time to upgrade? When do you now need to, or do you even, like, I've seen businesses that do 10 million revenue per year on Go High Level. I've seen some bigger, and I'm sure you have as well.
I've seen much bigger.
Okay, so what's the biggest business that you've seen on Go High Level?
I'm not going to say who, because I'm
like
helping
in
them.
revenue.
Yeah. They're probably doing about 60, 70 million a year.
Okay, they're doing 60, 70 million. How is Go High Level stopping them from achieving 100 million?
So I will tell you, they're doing 60, 70 million a year when they should be doing probably 150.
Okay.
Okay. Here's what I'll say between the two, right? And why we prefer HubSpot. Okay. We work with people that are a little bit past, right? Early stage. They've proven their offer. They've got marketing. They've got lead flow. They have a sales team, right? Or they're an established business owner. Like they know what they're doing, right? They just want things set up properly in the beginning, right? So these companies that are really scaled out on something like Go High Level or a Close or an Active, like whatever they're on, right? When I say fragmented, I mean, if you have GHL, right? Yes, you're going to be able to run your automations, your email, your different stuff along those lines. But what's the most important thing at scale, if I had to ask you?
Efficiency.
Okay, efficiency. Yes, 100%. How do you get efficiency?
So in what area of the CRM? Do you mean in marketing or in sales?
In marketing, sales, client success, like how do you actually know if you're being efficient or not?
By reports.
Okay. Can you generate reporting on GHL?
We know it's awful.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
So there's your answer, right? What ends up happening is these companies scale out, right? And then they're running in Google Sheets, so it's manual reporting, or they're zapping everything over to a Looker Studio, or they're running it into a query. They're building all of these different complexities to try and pull data out of the platform to actually visualize the reporting, which creates a lot of complexity, right? Over time, it basically decreases the confidence in your actual numbers and metrics. And then if anything changes, or if somebody doesn't do their actual reporting, right? Like for example, the company that I was alluding to, I asked them, hey, what's your lead to booking percentages? Like, can you tell me like how many leads are coming in, how many are actually getting the call, and can you break that down by rep? And they're like, yeah, it's going to take me like 3-4 days, right? I'm like, oh, well, I've got a company here that's doing 100 million, and I can show you all of this color-coded, red, yellow, green, visualized exactly what's going on for today, this week, this month, this quarter, this year, whatever the case may be, right? And it's all native, right? The second argument that I want to put to bed right away too is the cost, right? So when you look at HubSpot itself, or even take a look at like Salesforce, right? By the way, I don't recommend Salesforce. It's not a platform I enjoy. Too much complexity. There's certain use cases for it, 100%. But for the clients we work with, Salesforce isn't the answer. But when you look at HubSpot, right? Let's say you have a 10-person sales team, right? You're generating a few thousand marketing contacts a month, right? You've got a decent business running. Your cost is going to be probably less than what it would be on a fragmented system, but it's going to be in one subscription fee. So let's say we have $3,000, right, in HubSpot. That means we have all of our marketing, we have our attribution for marketing, we have our sales, we have our pipeline, we have our automation, we have our email marketing, we have all of this stuff, including all of our optics, our operations, our client success, our onboarding, our fulfillment, our contracts, our payment process, everything inside of one house, right, at a $3,000 fee. Now let's take that,
okay,
1 second, and let's bring that over to, I'm just going to use GHL because that's what you're alluding to, right? Now we have GHL. We have typically in GHL, people are going to be using their landing pages, their booking stuff, their, the basics. But you're also going to be zapping a ton of information out to spreadsheets or to Looker Studio or to whatever the case may be, right? You're typically going to be using some kind of visualizer. So maybe it's a Plecto or data box or something that you're building in Studio or whatever, right? On top of that, you're going to have your client success side of things, which is typically going to be run out of a different platform if you want to do it the correct way, right? So you're going to have all these additional platforms that you're going to be paying per seat, per subscription, whatever, right? And you're going to end up being right around the same price regardless, right? So the difference, and then if you're on Close, right, let's just go with the other tech stack that a lot of companies in our space use, which would be like a Close, active campaign, schedule once, lots of Zapier, a Plecto, a data box, a Looker Studio, whatever, right? Let's just go off the basis, right? 10 seats in Close, it's like $85 a month, right? So you're at $850, right? Then you have active campaign, all of your marketing contacts, let's say another 1,000, right? So now you're at $1,850, right? Now let's talk about schedule once, right? I think it's like $20, $25 per seat, something like that, right? Now you're at, let's call it $2,300, right? Now let's talk about Zapier. You're running 100,000 zaps a month, right? 200,000 zaps a month, 300,000 zaps a month, right? Now you're at another 500, 600, right? You are already past the price of what you could have gotten in one house, right? So the difference, the long story short, just to answer your question super directly, is like, it's not like the platform, like you should use GHL in the beginning if that's what you're used to. But the reality is that at scale, and when you really start to ramp up, you want to centralize as much as you can into a platform that has the highest ceiling. And you want to keep as many data points together as possible, and you want to be able to do your reporting out of the primary platform that you're operating in, because that's how you're going to get the best data and be the most confident in that data, right? So with that being said, when companies start to scale, what happens is they hold on to something for too long, right? So they just bolt on, right? Now what that does is it creates a ton of complexity. It doesn't allow for accurate reporting. There's a lot of manual input that needs to happen, and stuff breaks, and the entire leadership team is running around just trying to hold the system together instead of trying to actually optimize and scale, right? When you're in one house and you build correctly, right, everything is in one system, so you're agile, for one. But for two, you're getting all of your optics, all of your reporting, and everything that you need to set up, trigger, whatever the case may be, out of one platform. So long term, you can scale. It's an enterprise platform, so it allows you to do all the things that these other platforms don't allow you to do, and you're inside of one house, right? So at the end of the day, you know, in terms of what we've seen, we've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these projects, and I've had thousands of these conversations. The difference between somebody who scaled on HubSpot and who scaled on a fragmented platform is that this company is focused on growth, profitability, and they're focused on a lot less, right? They're focused on optimizing, not just being an emergency room as a leadership team, right? And I'll use the analogy as like, when you're building on HubSpot, you're kind of building in like a holistic way to basically like, you know, we're going to the gym, we're working out, we're eating clean, we're doing all these things so that we can keep scaling and growing, because we don't have all of the problems that other fragmented platforms are going to make, which then you operate more as like an emergency room, where you constantly have patients coming in and you're constantly.
That's a nice example about the emergency room.
Yeah.
You know, we switched to HubSpot about a year ago, and now you're helping us optimize it, because
Yeah.
I think my business is a great example of a business that wanted to think ahead and elevate its systems, and then we invested in better software, but never invested in actually using the software properly.
It's a really good point.
So then I think I'm in a similar boat to a lot of people, because a lot of our clients are either using Close, GHL, Pipedrive, I don't know why, but like
I remember when Pipedrive was the thing.
Yeah,
like
so
7,
they're
8
using
years ago. Yeah.
they're using all these softwares,
Yeah.
but they're not even using those properly. So they have a habit of buying a software, using 10% of its features, and then not looking at data. So how would you approach a business like mine that has got these systems in place, but doesn't really know what to actually start fixing first?
Yeah, so what you just stated is super common, right? Hey, this platform, it has all the features, it's got all the stuff, right? We're going to switch and it's going to fix our problems. No. You could buy the best platform in the world, and if you don't set it up right, it doesn't matter, right? So when you're, let's say for you guys, right? You switch over to HubSpot, right? It's good that you switch over earlier rather than later, right? So decision well made, right? We want to be in something sooner before we have a bunch of team members. We have to retrain. We got to migrate a ton of crazy stuff over. And we don't want to do that when we're like this, right? But if you don't build things properly, right, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. You're going to have the same problems. And what a lot of people do is they transition platforms, but they never actually fix any of the problems. So, you know, our whole philosophy when we're looking at a system, and I was mentioning this to you earlier, is we break everything into basically components of an engine, right? Your business is a bunch of interconnected engines. That's how we look at it, right? And the makeup of an engine is a specific role, right? So it's expectations and responsibilities, right? This would be your expectations, think like KPIs, right? What are they expected to do, right? Responsibility is the function they own, right? So if we're talking about a setter, they need to book calls, right? And then you have a process, right? That process is how you actually do something with the highest basically repeated result possible, right? So when you bring in a setter, it's training them on how to dial, how to have the conversation, how to qualify, how to get them booked on the calendar, what to do afterwards, blah, 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 right? Now, where you get the scalability or where you get all of your problems is the platform, right? The platform should wrap around both of those components, right? And that is what creates an engine. So when we're looking at a system, right, and when we're going to build something, or you're going to be going through this process with us very soon, we start with establishing baseline, right? And we let the data tell us what we need to put together, and we look at it as like a current state versus future state. And what we're trying to identify is where the time leaks are happening, where the revenue leaks are happening, where the accountability is faulty, so where we're actually tracking a bunch of stuff that may or may not matter. And we're also trying to make sure that the role has proper expectation set on what should be happening, right? So for example, if we understand our baseline for sales, right? So what we're spending all in on marketing, what our leads, how many leads we're generating, right? How many calls we're making, what our connection rate is, what our call to set percentage, all these different components, how many booked calls, how many people show up, how many people get offers, how many people close, our average deal, all of this stuff. What we do is we take the trailing 90 days and we put all of this in. It'll spit back our baseline, right? Which is our averages, right? So when we're going into a new system, we're looking at each engine. We're trying to identify the areas of opportunity that are the biggest, meaning they have the highest impact, right, for the lowest amount of disruption. And we want to compare that from current state to future state. So when people switch platforms, the first component that is the reason why these companies fail or these projects fail is proper planning, right? And a lot of people plan based on features. Oh, we have to have this feature. We need the AI this. We need the AI. We need all of these things. The reality is that if you just planned a foundational build, left to right, properly organized, proper expectations, proper baseline, proper process, right? Platform wraps around it. We're optimizing towards a few specific metrics, and we have really clean reporting on that specific engine and that specific role that's functioning in there. That's going to get you way more results in your transition, right? And it's going to allow you to adopt the platform much faster because there's not going to be a bunch of errors. What happens is people will switch in, they'll build a bunch of crazy stuff, nothing works, and then the team is like, hey, this sucks. Like, can we go back to what we're used to, right? So, it's a very long answer, but like when we're working with companies, there's 3 areas why they would fail, right? It's planning. So we have a very specific way of planning. It's going to be the execution, right? So straying from the plan, right? Or not having the right people to actually execute, right? So I'll give you the use case of, actually I spoke at an event and I gave this analogy and people were like, oh, that's hilarious. And that makes sense. But let's say you're building a house, right? You pay this company, great architect. They're amazing. They give you the full blueprint, the plan, the timeline, the resources. They know everything. They put it all down. You're super happy with it, right? Then you're sitting at dinner at Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, and your uncle who used to be in construction is like, yeah, their plan, yeah, I can get it done faster. I can get it done cheaper. I used to build houses, or I was in construction. I helped build houses. Let me do it for you. It's going to be cheaper, faster. I'm going to be able to build, everything they're talking about. And to be honest, some of this doesn't really make sense to me. So you, as a business owner, let somebody assume responsibility who has never done it before. What happens next Christmas? You're sitting down with them and they go, hey, we're over budget by a few $100,000. We're still not done. There's lots of problems. Honestly, I think you need somebody else to come do this, right? So that's where execution falls, is because a lot of the times when people are building and they're really growing, like you said, is they'll pay for the right stuff, but they don't actually execute properly. And they have people who will assume responsibility of things that shouldn't, right? If your sales director assumes responsibility of building the system, well, then your sales director is focused on building a system that they've never built, right? Instead of building and working with the people and the team and the process, right? Which is 2 bad things. Someone's building something they've never done, and they're also focused on not the thing they're best at, right? The last component, which is the silent killer, is adoption, right? You have to have, you could plan it, you could execute it perfectly. This thing could be sick, right? Perfectly executed, perfect system, right? But then you bring everybody into it, bad training, bad rollout, bad adoption, no one knows what they're doing, right? And all of a sudden, nothing works. Right?
I absolutely love all of this stuff that you're saying. It makes me think about a story. So in 2018, I was a sales trainer and sales manager for a company that had hundreds of sales reps. And the company decided to move across to Microsoft Dynamics as a CRM. And they...
What kind of business?
It was a gym. So it was a gym industry. So they had, at the time, they had 100 plus gyms across the country in the UK.
Okay.
And I was...
Was it a franchise?
It was Richard Branson's gym company, Virgin Active.
Okay.
So it's not a franchise, but it was all owned by them.
Yeah.
And then when they implemented this system, they already went from one system that wasn't being used properly to a new system. And I had the challenge given to me by the director and said, your job is to make sure everyone uses a CRM. And I'm a new manager at the time, and I'm okay at people skills, but I didn't really understand the change curve. I didn't understand the change and how to get people to adopt into a new system. And I want you to speak to me in that person that I was back then on how you would guide me, because I didn't get the guidance and I had to learn the hard way. And now, like, we moved a company across to close recently, which you'll be hating to hear.
Hey,
but this company that we moved across, we then had a system where we told them, this is the change curve that you're going to go through. You're going to hate it, but this is what will happen next. How would you guide me to adopt this business and the new system for all of these reps? And there's, let's say, 400 salespeople in this company.
Yeah. So a few things. It's going to differ depending on size, obviously, right? If you have 400 reps, well, you're going to do it in a sunset way. So you're going to roll out to different groups, and it's going to be very different. But let's take it down to like the typical people that are going to be watching this, and I'll explain it that way, right? So what we do, so let's say we get the scope, get the plan, we get everything laid together, we do the actual phase gates, so we get through all of the phases, we do all the QC, everything's amazing, we're ready to rock and roll to go into adoption. We've created something that we call an adoption campaign, right? An adoption campaign, when you're transitioning to a new system, or even when you're optimizing a system, right? There's a few rule sets that you have to go with. One is you cannot roll out more than one thing to a specific role in any 30-day, basically, time period, right? So if you're bringing setters into a new system, right? Well, you're going to be training them on that system, and nothing's going to change for at least 30 days, right? Closer, same thing, right? Because a lot of times what will happen is like people are building and optimizing, doing all this stuff, and say they're on HubSpot or they're on a platform already and they're making changes. So they just change the lead prioritization, they change the dialer, they change
even the naming conventions.
They change all of these things all at the same time. So setters are now running around crazy trying to figure out what to do, and they can't ever actually really get good at the one change that you're trying to make. And when you're changing these things, it should be changes to impact a specific metric, and you lose that when you try and spread focus. So it's just a key. But when we look at an adoption campaign, and I'm going to flip what you said, right? You mentioned, hey, we're making some changes, you're going to hate it, but the way we do it is when we're building with a client, once we get through to kind of towards the end, right, we actually demo it for the team. And we show them exactly what metrics we're trying to impact.
Get their dopamine up, get them excited.
We say, hey, look, guys, your call to set average right now is you're making 35 dials per set, right? Why is that? Well, it's because you're reaching into a bucket that has no lead prioritization, right? You don't know who you've called multiple times. You don't know how quickly you're getting to leads. You don't, all of these things. Here's what the new system looks like. And our goal is to get you guys down to 20 dials per set, which means if you do the same amount of dials in a day, 100, right? Instead of booking 2 to 3 people, you're going to be booking 4 to 6, right? And we show them how this stuff is going to impact them and what we're actually building for. And we get them salivating. Usman, please, dude, like, let us in. Like, I know we're going in 2 weeks, but like, we want, like, please let us in the new system. Let us in. So we want that aspect first, right? That is one of the first things you have to do properly, okay? Yeah. Now, the second thing that we do is, especially when we're migrating to a new platform, and I'm going to keep using setters for this example, we set a competition. So you said gyms, and I love that. When you sign up with a gym, if you just sign up, right, people aren't typically going to go. But why is like New Year's the big thing? Why is like, why do gyms run challenges and all? Well, it's because when you get into a competition or you get into something that's over a 30-day period, and there's a reward or there's some kind of like, competitive aspect. Salespeople are competitors, right? So you need to make things about competition, leaderboards, stuff along those lines. So when we're coming into a new system for a setting team, we want to put a competition together. We want to give them a first place, second place, third place, right? During the training, it's the first thing that we go over. Hey guys, so our goals are, we want our call to set rate to go from 35 to 20. Okay, we want our lead to booking rate for all of you guys. Our average right now is 10%. We want to go to 15% for each one of you guys, right? This is how we're going to do it, right? At the end of this 30-day period, right? Whoever's in first place, second place, third place, first place gets $2,500, second place gets X, third place gets X, whatever the case may be. Or you can do future-based bonuses, like first place, second place, third place. First place gets 3% commission increase for the next 30 days after we close the competition. Second place gets 2, third place gets 1, whatever you want to do, right? But now we're putting them into a competition to use the new system. They've already been salivating over it, right? We're pushing them towards very specific metrics for them to focus on. We're showing them how to do that in the new system, right? And we're rolling a competition over the next 30 days. So now when you go in and you do your training, which is going to be the last component, right? You need the actual playbook, which is going to be the resources to help them, right? And then you need the training agenda, which is we're going to train for 3 days, X, Y, Z, and then on that Monday, the following Monday, we're going to go live, and you guys are going to be in the new system, right? So you've essentially, 1, you've aligned it to their benefit. 2, you've made it, I mean, dude, like, hey guys, we're buying you all a Ferrari, right? You've all been racing in a Mercedes, right? You're now going to go into a Ferrari, right? They want it. They're drooling over it, right? And then we're rolling a competition so that when they wake up each day prior to going into training, they're like, I got to win that competition. I got to win that competition. I got it. So they're going to pay attention more. They're going to be adopting what you're training them on, right? And on top of that, there's going to be a lot of self-accountability around that because you already have the metrics and the leaderboard and everything set up to go along with that adoption campaign, right?
Incredible.
And if you go over a 30-day period, a 60-day period, a 90-day period, a lot of the times, like, you train, you launch that competition, and they're on it. They're going.
The sales manager 8 years ago really could have done with that advice.
Yeah, well, I hope this helps other people, because it is one of the most important components.
And that's exactly why we make this content as well, because I know it will help. Like, everything that I'm kind of doing is very mission driven, which I was telling you around sales leadership. And my strengths within sales leadership, you can have so many components within sales leadership. Like, you are great at sales ops, which is a different type of sales leader compared to someone who's very good with people. I'm not saying you're not good at people, but also someone's natural ability will lean more around diving deep with those people and developing those people, working alongside them and getting their skill set up. And then someone would approach this, would be able to get their revenue up for the sales team or get more sales by changing and tweaking things on the sales system, the workflows, the processes. Mm-hmm. And someone who knows both is just an expert sales director, someone who can do both of those things and tweak it in those sides. Is that how you see it as well?
So my progression, like in my business career, right? I won't do the early version story, but so I owned and ran a company called Social X. This was a long time ago, right? It was like we were doing business conferences all around the country. I was like 19 at the time, 20 at the time. We're talking 350 person, 30 speakers, people coming in from all over, 3-day events, retreats in Mexico, like really cool stuff. And we basically had a bunch of startups paying us a monthly subscription, and we would go get big name consultants to come in and basically coach them, right? That basically kind of fell apart. My business partner wanted to kind of go do something else. It was really our first kind of business that did decent, right? So there was lots of problems, and I was really young too. But what it did give me is a big network of a lot of startups, right? And I got my start in basically sales management, sales, whatever you want to call it, because I was talking to a software company at the time. They were one of our clients. We were using them. I really enjoyed working with them, whatever. They were really early on, like, 20, 25K MRR, like Chrome extension, whatever. And they were like, hey, we've been trying to build a sales team for a while now. Like, it's just not working. Like, You want to take a stab at it? I was like, yeah. It's like, let's do it. So I got to put a blindfold on, and I basically recruited a bunch of my high school friends, my college buddies, and I was just basically having them set for me, and I was taking 10, 15, 20 calls a day.
Nice.
Right? And what ended up happening is I got my first chance to really scale a team. And, you know, it was about a 7-8 month period. We went from 0 to about 100 full cycle reps. Okay. We outgrew 2 offices. We went from wherever we were, 20, 25 KMR to 500, 600 KMR, Inc. 5, I mean, a whole bunch of different stuff. Right. And what I realized is I was really, really good at understanding how to basically get to a point where bottlenecks were a thing and then build a solution, right? Because I had never managed a team. So at first it was just like, all right, just load me up with calls. I'm going to make you guys money by making me money, right? So just book as many people as you can. I'm going to take them all, right? And then I got good at training on how to close. And then I got good at training basically how to actually go from setting to closing. And then at a certain point, I had too many people to manage. So I was like, what am I going to do? I started reading military books and pod structures and how many people can actually be managed. And then we started running competition. So we split the group in half and we started competing, right? And all these different things that started coming to me were, I guess, sales ops, right? Like, how do we structure the team? Do we have team leads, player coaches that have closers under them, that have setters underneath them, and they roll reports to me, and then I roll reports up, right? Training resources was becoming a problem, so I put in a promotion structure. Once you hit your 3rd milestone as a setter, you become eligible for promotion to a closer. You know, in doing that, you have to take your 10 best basically sets, put them in a drive. You have to create your own script. You have to make 3 trainings on 3 things that you wish you had when you came in. So I started replicating all these things and just building all of the stuff. I had no training. So I was just like, how do I make this easier for me, right? How do I keep scaling? So I got really good with the people first, right? And I got really good with the skill set. And long story short, I started doing this fractionally, where I would go into companies, basically take the sales department over, and I'd scale it to high hell, and then I would exit, right? So I'd basically replace myself out of the business. And at the time, we were hiring a bunch of these operations companies. They didn't understand sales. They didn't understand market. Like, they just didn't understand, right? So I was telling them what I needed. I was telling them how to do it. And a lot of times I was just doing it for them, right? So that transitioned me into looking at the system, right? And long story short, these skill sets kind of stack together. So like, when you become a great salesperson, right? The kind of natural evolution a lot of times is like, then you get really good at like replicating your skill set into other people, right? After you get good at replication, management is another really hard thing to learn, because you can be good at training, but you can be a shit manager, right? So then you have to learn how to manage.
Very, very true.
Yeah.
Very true. And a lot of times when you promote a sales rep into a sales manager, that selfish desire, like, I know the technique to close, compared to I know how to motivate and develop you, is 2 different things. That's the mistake we commonly find.
100%. Well, there's evolution, right? So like, evolution phase 1 is like being really good with the skill set. So like being a really good closer, right? Then it's replicating, right? How do I actually replicate talent, right? So it's like, oh, I do X, Y, Z. That's why I'm good. This is my process. This is my talk track. This is my objection handling. This is this, right? That's evolution phase 2. Where shit gets really painful for a lot of people and where they fall short is they don't actually know how to manage a team properly. So they don't know how to actually set proper expectations. They don't know what KPIs or components to track. They don't know how to manage a team. They don't have a process around that. They're just really good at being really good at sales. Make sense?
Yep.
Right? So, you know, I'm kind of giving a long answer here, but like, the sales operations comes down to understanding how to set proper expectations, responsibility, and manage people, right? Understanding how to replicate talent through really strong process, right? And then understanding how to wrap platforms around so you can get the optics that you need so that your sales director can do extremely well at being a sales director, and operations can do extremely well at helping build the system underneath them to increase different things, right? So like a sales director, when we're looking at metrics, right, on how to actually properly manage somebody, right? And this will probably be really good for anybody that's listening, right? You know, new sales director, they're going to set KPIs. So let's take a setter, right? You need to do 100 dials a day, right? We need 3 sets, 4 sets a day, right? And you need to produce X amount of revenue, right? just random, KPIs, right? What we train our sales directors to look at, and whenever we're working with a company, is there's one metric that matters for setters, okay? There's also one metric that matters for closers, and that's your return on that individual as a sales director, as a sales department, as a business, right? And what I mean by that is we call the metric ROSA, which is return on setter activity, right? So if I have my average lead cost, I'm doing paid, organic, whatever. If you're all organic, then you're gonna equate whatever you're putting money into in terms of your organic marketing budget, right? But let's say our average lead cost is $10, hypothetically. Don't use that as a metric, it's $10 just for round, right? You're a setter. We have 10 setters on our team, okay? I've given you 100 leads. That's $1,000 I've given you this month, right? When we're looking at our baseline and we look at our average return off of the 10 setters, it becomes a 5X. So our average across all 10 people is a 5X. So I give you $1,000 within a 30-day time period, right? You're delivering $5,000 back off of your calls, your sets, your et cetera, right? When we look at all of our reps and we break it down by ROSA, and our top 3 people have a 25X return, right? Our middle 4 have, let's say between 5 or between a 4 and 6, right? Whatever. And then our bottom 2 or 3 have a 2.5 or a 2X. Well, we know that they're probably not making their dials, or maybe they are, right? But then we can go and we can look and say, okay, hey, Jimmy, you're at a 2X, right? You're below our baseline. So a couple things are going to happen, just like we talked about in the beginning. Whenever you're below a 2X based off of the 30-day window for the month, right? Or below our average, which is 5X, right? We're turning off lead flow for you. And you need to make it back to our 5X, and then you'll be turned back on. You have 30 days to do that.
So you stop giving them new leads and get them to find within their current lead flow. Okay,
they have to get back to a 5X return. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense as a business for us to give them more leads, right?
I love that.
And it allows us to give them a PIP in a way, right? A performance improvement plan.
Protect your revenue and 100%. Protect your ad spend.
Right.
And because if business owners don't do that, what you tend to find is, so if I was in a business that didn't have all the reporting to see ROSA, is it ROSA, the metric?
ROSA.
Yep. So if they weren't looking at ROSA, what that sales manager would say, I need to spend more time with those setters that aren't performing. And now they're spending 30-40% of their time with the bottom performers, hurting the rest of the team.
Yep.
Because that would have happened if they didn't have that metric.
Well, it makes it really easy, right?
Yeah.
I can look across my 10 people. I see that 2 are below our average, right? I set my one-on-ones with them, as any sales director is going to do. Hey, you're below our ROSA average. Here's what's going to happen, just like I said, right? Your lead flow is going to turn off. You have 30 days to get back to a 5X or above, right? What I noticed is you're doing your dials, right? So you're hitting your call KPI, but your set average is really low, right? Your connection rate's the same. All of this stuff is the same. I listened to a few of your calls, right? What you need to do is you need to go in and listen to Paul and Brittany, right? And listen to how they open every single conversation on their outbound sets, right? Because that's the component you're missing right now. That's why they're doing 25X and you're doing 2, right?
I just want to send a voice note to my team because I'm not going to make it to their team call. So I just need to pause and trim this out, the podcast, for a sec.
The real life of running a business.
If you can just let Omar take ownership of the stuff within ClickUp, the boards coming across, make sure that's done on this call. Also mention to Jaden how you're not seeing stories, and I mentioned that to you, stories and automation currently in the podcast, so I can't make it to this meeting. So if you can just mention to Jaden and say, automation's out there, many chats has only been done once, say all the things I was saying to you about the stories as well, and tell them that we need to see better collaboration between short and long form. And then I'll have to catch up with you guys later. I just can't make it to this meeting. Catch you later. Bye-bye. It was an important meeting as well, but this is more important. I'm in a good flow state with you, and I really am. Like, what I want to like, I really want to keep, like, the way you're viewing things is so different to how many sales managers would view them. Because how that same scenario that you just mentioned around a team, on how you would stop their lead flow, and then you would actually put them on a PIP, and how you would deal with it, somebody else would deal with it completely differently. And this is why when, like, commonly the people that we work with they want to develop their sales manager, they want to become better at the people management and people systems oriented stuff, or they're a marketer who's got all of these leads but has no idea how to manage a sales team, and they're just pulling their hair out because they think about things how, I've told them to do this, why have they not done it? It doesn't make sense. If someone told me to do something, I would do it straight away. They just see it in such a black and white scenario, but they don't see the grey of people. How would you help a marketer who's, like, I write about sales leadership. This is a big vision of mine on making great sales leaders. How would you help a lot of these younger marketers that could be making under 10 million a year and are in the startup phase of their business? How would you develop them with the right skills or the right systems to be able to start developing and growing their team?
So you're talking about the collaboration between marketing and sales.
Yeah.
So there's the forever long, I'm sure you've heard it, everybody else always heard it, where it's like, you guys aren't closing.
Yeah.
Lead quality sucks.
Yeah.
Right? All this stuff. The reality is that, like, that's the reason we use baseline, right? When we know marketing is spending X, our, lead to booking is X, our lead to close is X, all of these different components. When certain things fluctuate, right? What you have to understand is, like, marketing, and so if you're a CMO and you have a sales director, right? The most productive relationship there is like, that's your right hand, right? And I'm your left, right? And you can't really have that unless there's good communication and there's a process around how we look at data and how we actually diagnose what the problems are, right? And that's why I like baseline, right? Because baseline, whether it's a marketing specific metric or it's a sales specific metric, is going to tell us exactly where we need to look, and it allows for clean collaboration on what we're going to do to actually impact that, right?
What metrics go into your baseline? So when you measure for the last 3 months, what are they specifically?
So easiest thing to start with, if we're just talking like a general sales model, is you're going to have your marketing costs. So what you spend in ads, right? If you're working in a studio like this to generate creative for those ads, like, you're going to put your marketing cost in, right? That's going to give you your true lead cost, right? Then you're going to take your dials. So how many you're going to take your leads. How many leads do we generate for this 30-day window, right? Then you're going to take your calls. So how many outbound calls did we do? You're going to take your total amount of sets. Let's say it's a disco and then close, right? So 2-call sale, or maybe it's a 1-call, but regardless, doesn't matter. You're going to take your total sets, and then you're going to break those two down into self-booked, so they booked through the funnel, and outbound, which is they booked through a setter, right? So you're going to split those two up. Once you have that, you're going to have basically your total amount of closing calls booked, right? So total disco broken down by percentages. Then your total closing calls, right? You're going to make a column for offers. So how many offers did we make, right? How many deals did we close, net new? What's our revenue and what's our cash? Really easy. We can do a lot with that, right? One, we can get our lead to booking. We can get our lead to close. We can get our show rates. We can get our offer percentage. We can get our offer to close rate. We can get our closing call booked close rate, right? We can get our call to set average, meaning how many dials does it take for us to actually get somebody set, right? You can take all these metrics just from those numbers, right? Now, if you take those numbers and you do it for, let's say last quarter, we're in a brand new quarter, right? So let's take the last 3 months, right? Or I'll just use January, February, March, right? Those three metrics are your Q1 baseline, right? So all three of those broken down into the 3 months will create your average, right? So if you have a deviation up, you spend a bunch more 1 month, and then you spend a little bit less or whatever, you're just going to get the median right in the middle, right? So that's how you would establish like a front end, very simple baseline, right? Now, what we do is we take that and we bring it into basically a forecast sheet, which is where we put in the capacity formulas for sales. So capacity formula for sales would be like, how many hours are we spending in meetings as a setter, right? How much productivity time do we have for outbound dialing, right? If they're taking, discovery calls or whatever, how many discovery calls or what the time frame is, whatever. So we can get all of their basic numbers, and we basically forecast against that baseline. So like, if we spend an extra 50,000, instead of 2 setters, we need 3, and they're going to be at 75% capacity, right? Now you can do a lot with these numbers, and I think I'm going the wrong direction to what we started with, but when you have that, right, and marketing says, hey, our ROAS is like not doing so hot, like it was really good last month, what's going on? And we look at baseline, and well, we see our call to set percentage went up drastically. Our call to set average, right, went from 35 to 55, went from 35 to 75, whatever, right? Now we know where to look, right? Okay, our connection is the same, so we're talking to the same amount of people. Did we adjust the funnel? Yes, we did. Okay. Do we have nurture cadence set up? Like, are people getting emails and like, engaging with content prior to us actually dialing them? Okay, that's set up. Let's look at speed of lead. Oh, wow, okay. We're not getting to these leads quickly. So when we're talking to them, they don't even remember who we are, right?
Yeah.
Our average first dial time is like 48 hours later. Why? Oh, our system is not prioritizing these leads because it's a new funnel. Boom, fixed, done, we're good.
And just
right?
specifically about this scenario, what we're finding for a lot of our businesses when we listen to their setter calls, even our own, if you don't call them really quickly, like extremely quick, within a couple of minutes, sometimes maybe within 60 seconds, they got hit by retargeting ads because a pixel recognized they like your product and they need that thing. Mm-hmm. Then they get hit with everybody else. Then they've now booked so many calls or seen so many things, they have no idea who you are anymore.
Could happen, for sure. I mean, so we go off like the golden pocket rule. So the way that we do it is when a lead comes in, if it's within working hours, so like, let's say Monday through Friday, 9 to 6, whatever, right? If it's within working hours, it'll immediately get delegated to the rep, right? They're going to be assigned ownership, and then we're going to stamp the delegation date and time, right? Which starts a timer. Once they make the first outbound call, right, it stops that timer. It gives us the time.
So in HubSpot, a contact has come in. Mm-hmm. They got assigned to that setter straight away, and then a timer has started.
Yeah, so there's a calculation property that runs that basically is the time from delegation, date and time, to the time of first outbound dial, right?
Okay.
Now, if a lead comes in Saturday night, right, 1 a.m., whatever the case may be, the lead still gets delegated, but the delegation date and timestamp only runs during working hours. Okay. So we have 2 different speed of lead formulas. One, which is true, which is create date to first dial, and then we have our working hours, which is delegation date and time to first outbound dial. So,
nice. Otherwise, your speed to lead is skewed because you're counting of all the people that came in at midnight.
Well, you run ads, I run ads.
Yeah.
Saturdays and Sundays are freaking banging, dude. Like leads pile in, right? But we have AI that runs on weekends and after hours, and the reps aren't working. So if their speed of lead is 20 hours, I'm like, guys, what the hell is going on? But then if we break it down to working hours, they're in the first 15 minutes every time. You're solving for the wrong thing, dude. Right? Yeah. So, but we do look at both. We look at true and we look at working hours, right? But my point in saying all of that is like, and honestly, this brings us back to the perfect point of your question in the very beginning of this podcast. Like, why would I spend more? Why would I do X, Y, Z? Well, because what I'm talking about is actually quite simple in something like HubSpot, right? You can get these metrics very easily, natively in the platform. It's built to deliver these types of optics, right? And I think you can imagine, right, what having this data does is it makes you a lot more profitable, a lot more revenue, and it allows you to make decisions very quickly and stay focused, right? But yeah, I mean, I can't remember where exactly we were going with that, but it
was really more about setter efficiency. You're talking around, first we were talking more around leadership, And then now we pivoted on to more setter efficiency. And then how great leaders also know how to drive performance, but know how to manage people and systems collaboratively.
I think my point where I was originally heading with that was like, when marketing and sales can collaborate around a specific way of collaborating, right? It mitigates the pointing fingers, right? Because they're more interested in finding the actual solution because they have the numbers to review, and that's their process. Right? If we're coming into a meeting, you're marketing, I'm sales, and we don't have something like baseline, or we don't have a process established for how we're going to review things, and I go, reps are pissed, dude. Why? Lead quality sucks. They can't get anybody on the phone. Nobody's answering. When they do answer, they don't know who we are, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, our lead cost is down. Our applications are up. Our booking rate is really down. So like, are you training the reps? Right? And then it's just this back and forth, right? And that's typically how a lot of marketing and sales operate, right? But when it goes, Usman, look, man, reps are saying some stuff, they're saying lead quality is down, et cetera, whatever. I generated a baseline for us. Like, let's run through it real quick. I know you're seeing some problems and booking rates dropping, costs going up, whatever. Let's get to the bottom of this real quick, right? Boom, find the problem. Once we find the problem, we can draw conclusions on how we're going to fix that, right? Once we draw conclusions on how we're going to fix that, me and you are both aligned on what we're going to be doing over the next 30 days to fix that, right?
We recently onboarded a new business, and this business, we managed to get their revenue up by like $200,000 or $300,000 within a month, but we didn't actually make any more like adjustments to sales. All we actually did was we got every sales rep on the team, there was 5 of them. We got them to keep like a log of everything they do in a day, because we just want to understand what they're doing. So every 15 minutes, just write what you've done. And then we realized that the CEO was asking them to do onboarding tasks, was asking them to do operational tasks.
Oh yeah.
And it was taking up 30% of their day. So then we had to almost battle with the CEO to say, after the contract is signed, leave these guys alone. 100%. Don't give them a single task. And the CEO was fighting with us because he was like saying, but someone has to do it. So we urged him to hire someone, even a VA or someone to hire the stuff. And then the sales reps won 30% of their time back, and they made 30% more money, which was the exact correlation that we predicted, simply by winning back their time.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I look at, I don't like full cycle models at all. The reason being is that if I'm full cycle and lead to booking is down, right? I go, hey, you're closing your dog. Great closing. Hey, we need you to book more calls. And then their close rates go down and their follow-up deals go missing and all these things. And then we try and tell them to go back and then do this and do that. It's the same thing. Like, hey, you got to onboard your people. You got to manage No. Not the way to do it. It's not going to scale well, right? So the way that we look at our sales team when we're looking at a true set close model is there's 3 roles. We have our setters, book calls, right? We have our closers, close deals. And then we have an in-between role, which is typically,
lead nurture.
It's basically a confirmation specialist.
Okay.
Right? So every single time an appointment gets scheduled, they operate as the executive assistant to whoever basically that prospect was booked to. They basically prompt the conversation. So the automation fires all that stuff. We get a response. They go in, requalify. So call them, text them, email, whatever it is. Requalify, confirm the appointment, right? Once it's confirmed, they nurture all the way up until the meeting, right? And that's how, we have a very sophisticated confirmation specialist role and then engine. But the way we look at it is like, look, setters are super important. Yes. Closers, extremely important. Yes. Why do we have no confirmation role, right? Doesn't make sense. Reason being is show rate is a direct correlation to how much throughput your system's going to have, right? If you have a high no-show rate, now you have to rebook a bunch of people who are likely going to no-show again, right? On top of that, your ROAS, your return on your department, that one metric is so important, and people just try and rely on automation. And they have like this one-size-fits-all pre-call, and they're like, oh, my show rate sucks. I'm like, well, duh.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no experience there. right? If you book a call with our team, you're getting a call from Julietta. Julietta's super amazing, nice voice, like excited to talk to you, ask a couple questions, get you set, right? Puts all the notes into the system, then drops you a bunch of resources based on whatever your questions are, checking in with you all the way up to the meeting start time, and then the meeting start time happens and you're on the call, right? And that right there is going to beat out any kind of automation or random thing that you can put into a system at the end of the day. But again, show rate engine, right? You have a role, we've got a process, and then we've got the platforms that wrap around it, right? So it's not just a role that we slap in and call everybody, right?
Yeah, and the big lesson that I've kind of taken away before we wrap up today is mapping out your engines is probably the most single biggest task you have to do. When I speak to business owners and I say, oh, can you just show us your sales process? And they say it verbally to me. I say, oh, have you written it out? And you probably see this a lot. And I think having just a written business process map or a flow chart, whatever it is one of the highest leverage tasks someone can do, because it will bring you clarity just seeing what your business is actually supposed to be doing.
100%. I mean, you can, if you're not great at wireframes or whatever, like just start simple. Like literally, what are the steps? Lead in, what happens? Just start super high level, right? Left to right. As you get better, you can go up and down.
Yep.
Right? So you can get the left to right primary boxes, and then you can build out the monstrosities that I'm sure people market with and you see all the time. But you don't need to start with that. I mean, what I would say in general is like the reason certain people are successful and others aren't is because there's a lot of uncommon things that come with planning, right? Like, do you actually do your baseline report? Do you actually do the wireframe? Do you put together a plan? And do you do it in an effective way, in an efficient time frame, to where you're not just planning, right? You set a plan, you get it as good as you can get it, you give yourself a time frame, and then you roll into execution really hard. And the reality is like great sales directors, great CMOs, great founders, like they're really good at doing the uncommon stuff that no one else does.
Yeah.
Right? So when it's time to plan, they actually take the time to plan, they do a really good job. When it's time to execute, they execute according to the plan and they don't stray, right? When they go in for training, they do the most, right? You could train and just like give people, hey, we're going to train for 3 days on this new system. Or you could do what I talked about at the beginning of the episode with an adoption campaign, roll out a competition, get them excited, demo the platform, show them the metrics and what we're trying to attack, right? So these are all uncommon ways of doing things that if people just took it upon themselves to like, all right, we're training, how can I just make it a little bit better, right? Give an example, and then we can close out. When I was running meetings for the first time with a big team, right, it got really boring. Right, I was showing up, I was like, oh shit. They were showing up like, oh God, we're gonna sit here for 30 minutes, do the same thing. What'd I do? I was like, all right, how do I make this sick? We got a freaking giant wheel spin.
Yeah.
And every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we'd spin the wheel, which was basically had a bunch of different role plays on it. So it was like we had King of the Hill, 2 versus 1, heads up, speedball, 1 versus 1, founder takeover. We had all these different things on this, and we'd spin the wheel. So every time they showed up, and then we had call reviews as well. Whatever it landed on, we'd go into. So no one was ready for what was going to happen, and it just made it different.
And it feels fair to them. You're not just doing call reviews all the time. You're not.
100%.
It doesn't feel like you're drilling them.
Well, they show up, right? And when they show up, they don't know what to expect, right? So it allows things to be a little bit more, just enjoyable. And like, that's a really silly kind of example, but like, you were talking about being playful earlier, right? Like business can be playful in a way where you can use creativity and you can do uncommon things that are going to make results compound a lot better and faster. And to be honest, that's just how we look at sales operations in general.
Yeah. I really appreciate your time, Aaron. I think it's absolutely amazing how the lens that you look at sales from, it's not common. And even in your onboarding, you say, this is the most uncommon onboarding that you're going to have.
Yeah.
And I do love it. And the process, the things I've seen from you as well have been amazing so far. So thank you for your time.
Absolutely, man. This was fun. Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Lead to Win podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've seen today, comment below. Tell us what your thoughts are. If you want to share the podcast, if not, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.